Chapter 1, Part 2. At last, a man whose name was Marco Polo, and who was a very brave and famous traveler, really did go there, in spite of all the trouble it took. And when he got back, his stories were so very surprising that men were all the more anxious to find a way to sail in their ships to Cathay and see it for themselves. But of course, they could not sail over the deserts and mountains, and they were very troubled because they had to give up the idea until the son of the King of Portugal, named Prince Henry, said he believed that ships could sail around Africa and so get to India, or the Indies as they called that land, and finally to Cathay. Just look at your map again and see what a long, long voyage it would be to sail from Spain and around Africa to India, China, and Japan. It is such a long sail that, as you know, the Suez Canal was dug some 20 years ago so that ships could sail through the Mediterranean Sea and out into the Indian Ocean and not have to go away around Africa. But when Columbus was a boy, it was even worse than now, for no one really knew how long Africa was or whether ships really could sail around it. But Prince Henry said he knew they could, and he sent out ships to try. He died before his Portuguese sailors, Bartholomew Diaz in 1493 and Vasco da Gama in 1497, at last did sail around it and got as far as the Indies. So while Prince Henry was trying to see whether ships could sail around Africa and reach Cathay in that way, the boy Columbus was listening to the stories the sailors told and was wondering whether some other and easier way to Cathay might not be found. When he was at school, he had studied about a certain man named Pythagoras, who had lived in Greece thousands of years before he was born, and who had said that the earth was round, like a ball or an orange. As Columbus grew older and made maps and studied the sea, and read books and listened to what other people said, he began to believe that this man named Pythagoras might be right, and that the earth was round, though everybody declared it was flat. If it is round, he said to himself, what is the use of trying to sail around Africa to get to Cathay? Why not just sail west from Italy or Spain and keep going right around the world until you strike Cathay? I believe it could be done, said Columbus. By this time, Columbus was a man. He was 30 years old and was a great sailor. He had been captain of a number of vessels. He had sailed north and south and east. He knew all about a ship and all about the sea. But though he was so good a sailor, when he said that he believed the earth was round, everybody laughed at him and said that he was crazy. Why, how can the earth be round? They cried. The water would all spill out if it were, and the men who live on the other side will all be standing on their heads with their feet waving in the air. And then they laughed all the harder. But Columbus did not think it was anything to laugh at. He believed it so strongly and felt so sure that he was right that he set to work to find some king or prince or great lord to let him have ships and sailors and money enough to try to find a way to Cathay by sailing out into the west and across the Atlantic Ocean. Now this Atlantic Ocean, the western waves of which break upon our rocks and beaches, was thought in Columbus's day to be a dreadful place. People called it the Sea of Darkness, because they did not know what was on the other side of it, or what dangers lay beyond that distant blue rim where the sky and water seemed to meet, and which we call the horizon. They thought the ocean stretched to the end of a flat world, straight away to a sort of jumping-off place, and that in this horrible jumping-off place were giants and goblins and dragons and monsters and all sorts of terrible things that could catch the ships and destroy them and the sailors. So when Columbus said that he wanted to sail away toward this dreadful jumping-off place, the people said that he was worse than crazy. They said he was a wicked man and ought to be punished. But they could not frighten Columbus. He kept on trying. He went from place to place trying to get the ships and sailors he wanted and was bound to have. As you will see in the next chapter, he tried to get help wherever he thought it could be had. He asked the people of his own home, the city of Genoa, where he had lived and played when a boy. He asked the people of the beautiful city that is built in the sea, Venice. He tried the king of Portugal, the king of England, the king of France, the king and queen of Spain. But for a long time, nobody cared to listen to such a wild and foolish and dangerous plan to go to Cathay by the way of the Sea of Darkness and the jumping off place. You would never get there alive, they said. And so Columbus waited, and his hair grew white while he waited. Though he was not yet an old man, he had thought and worked and hoped so much that he began to look like an old man when he was 40 years old. But still, he would never say that perhaps he was wrong after all. He said he knew he was right, and that someday he should find the Indies and sail to Cathay.